When I was young, I was studying to be a Catholic priest. Went to a seminary and when I was 15 years old. So I lived in the seminary monastery for only a year. And then I realized that actually it wasn't quite right for me. I went back to regular school, studying, what have you, and worked in the accounting business for the logging industry in Vancouver, British Columbia. But some things arose in my life that during that time, of course, there were a lot of influences. Young people were doing a lot of nonsense things. Then I actually was getting a little fed up, and I started praying and fasting for 3 days at a time, praying that I didn't really know where to go, although my background was Roman Catholic. I was praying more generally to God to send me a spiritual teacher. And on that basis, I was fasting. I was saying, if things go wrong with this particular situation I was in, then I would search out a spiritual teacher. And things went horribly wrong. Things went quite wrong. And I left Vancouver and traveled to Montreal, Canada, which is about 3,000 miles away, but Canada is a very big country. In Montreal, when I landed there, I had no place to stay. And I asked some of the young people in front of McGill University where there might be a place to stay. And they told me, oh, you go down here and there's some inexpensive apartments there. So I liked the room, but I was in Montreal. Montreal is a very nice city. I was young, so for the next week I was just looking for enjoyment. But the funny thing is, the room that was given to me to rent was right across from the Hare Krishna temple. A couple of years prior to that, I'd seen the devotees in Vancouver, and I would go to the other side of the street because it was too different, foreign from our background. And one time also I drove to go to the temple for free prasadam, but I didn't like the location in Vancouver. At that time it was located in a very, very poor neighborhood. Matter of fact, the temple was just the top of a factory building that managed and reprocessed old metal. So it was not a good area. But in any case, I ended up in Montreal and right across from the temple. So I decided, okay, 1 week here, I made a promise that I would search out. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to go and maybe talk to a priest, Catholic priest. Then a boy in a room next to me, he knocked on my door and he said, those Hare Krishnas, they have free food. Why don't you come over with me? And at first I wasn't convinced, but then he came again and he said, no, why don't we go over there? So I went. And actually, I didn't care for the food because I was very particular about what I ate. But a devotee, a nice devotee named Dharmaraj, he had been a devotee a couple of years only, but he was a very good preacher and fired up. So I really didn't eat, but I listened to him, and he explained everything so nicely that it felt like the pieces of a puzzle, all the questions that you might have had, because even before, years before, I thought because in Christianity they teach that you have to be saved by Jesus. And I thought, well, if there's life all over the universe, then Jesus must travel all over the universe to go save everybody. Otherwise, all those poor individuals or people in different continents would be, doomed, because they preach about going to hell. So any case, Dharmaraj, I sat and everybody was finished eating, but I kept sitting and sitting with him because the philosophy was so good. The boy who brought me, he left long time. And they gave me a little pamphlet that was printed at the time, maybe only a fold-out, 3 pages small. And not only from Dharmaraj, what he said convinced me, what I read convinced me. So the next day I went back to the temple. This was, the temple in Montreal at that time was in Park Avenue. Prabhupada, this is 1972. And Prabhupada actually, that temple was already there when Prabhupada stayed in Montreal a few years prior to this, because he went to Montreal to get visa. Canada was a Commonwealth country, so he had shelter in Canada while reapplying for a new visa for America. So his residence was very close there, but this is 3 years later, 1972, 3 or 4 years later. And it was an old converted bowling alley. And the walls between everything were just curtains, so the Mataji's behind one curtain or wasn't complete. But when I went the next day on Monday, there was a sign outside, only open Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. So I didn't go in. I went back to my room and waited till Wednesday. And I went in, and all the devotees were out in Harinam, Sankirtan. At the time, there were only about, I think, 13 devotees living in the temple, men and women. There was only one bathroom, shared. Everything was in the same small bathroom. And we would line up in the... Anyway, that's later. But I went on the Wednesday. The devotees were out in Sankirtan, and the temple president's wife, Urvashi. Temple president was Sripati. He was from England. She was American. Husband and wife managing the temple. And she was doing noon arti. And there was no tape recorder or music or anything, so she was singing. A very nice voice, and the atmosphere was so wonderful. So I asked the devotees when they came back if I could spend the night. I thought, if they're cheating, I will know by spending the night if they're living the philosophy which they're teaching. So I stayed the night. I had long hair and a beard, and I stayed the night, and everything was good. It was foreign, but everything was... I couldn't look at Lord Jagannath, because in Christianity, they don't allow these carvings, and it was so very strange. So I thought, no, I'm not going to look, I'm only going to listen. And then one night was good, and I thought, oh, it's easy to cheat people one night. I'll ask to stay another night. So that never ended, because I stayed for basically the rest of my life. That was in 1972. So because I was older than most devotees. Most of the devotees were joining were, 18, 19. Even if they joined a few years before, they joined when they were young. I was already 25. And I had management experience. So they immediately made me temple commander. I mean, right away. And, but I still had my long hair, and then the devotees were going for a preaching engagement in Quebec City, about 3-4 hours away from Montreal. So I was walking with, Dhoti and through the mall, and some people were calling me Jesus, because long hair and beard. So I decided, okay, I don't want to be called Jesus. And we went back to the room we were staying, and I asked the devotees to shave me up. So that was all within a week less of my meeting the devotees. And then I was doing service in the temple. So this was at the end of May 1972. And at the beginning of July, Srila Prabhupada was going to visit New York. He was going to be there for July 4th, but he arrived July 3rd, the night before. And July 4th is Independence Day in America, so very loud. But it takes about 8 hours to drive from Montreal to New York. So we all jumped in a vehicle, and drove down to meet Srila Prabhupada. So we went to the airport. We got there just in time. One of the devotees of Montreal was partially blind. He couldn't see so well. So I was helping him. And we stayed on the outside circle, and Prabhupada came in. 3 times the devotees were saying, "Oh, there's Prabhupada," and paying obeisances. And then Prabhupada wasn't there. So the 3rd time I stayed up. And of course, then Prabhupada came. And I was at the outside of the circle. Vishnujan Swami was leading very massive kirtan, wonderful kirtan. And because I was outside of the circle, then when Prabhupada came walking through, I was at the beginning, right? And we walked, and I led the partially blind devotee. And we sat to hear Prabhupada give a news conference at the airport. And as soon as that was over, we all rushed to the temple in New York to again see Prabhupada. And the next day, he gave initiation ceremonies. But the temple room in New York was half the size of this room. Whole temple, and so many devotees would come to see Prabhupada from everywhere. So Jayadvaita, Das Brahmachari at the time, he wasn't letting anybody in except those getting initiated. But there were 2 doors, so I was able to sneak in and stay. It was so hot in there, hot, very hot, and fire yagya, the devotees working so late at night, falling asleep, while Prabhupada's talking, because it's so tired and hot. But Prabhupada, so the fire yagya was performed. That was my first meeting with Srila Prabhupada. Now we quickly went back to Montreal, because we all had services there. And that time, of course, I didn't get a chance to speak to Prabhupada. And the emphasis was always to do your service. I went back to Montreal, but several months later, I moved back to Vancouver and joined the temple there. I did service there for some time, but Vancouver's, all the Vancouver devotees would regularly go to Los Angeles or San Francisco to see Srila Prabhupada. So several times I went there to be in the association of Prabhupada. I was there in 1974 at the Rath Yatra in Golden Gate Park, very famous Rath Yatra, because that's when the picture is taken when Prabhupada's standing and dancing. So I was on the stage with Srila Prabhupada, and actually it was my service to bring Lady Subhadra's prasad to the Rath Yatra. So of course she was, but they told me, you wait by Prabhupada's door, and when Prabhupada comes out, then you rush to the Rath Yatra side to tell everybody that Prabhupada is coming. So I was standing outside waiting at the street, and all the devotees were already gone to Rath Yatra. So one of the sannyasis came out and said, chant, chant. So I was just me, Hare Krishna. I felt very embarrassed just to me be singing only by myself. And then Prabhupada got into the car, and I ran to the car, Lady Subhadra's plate was already in the car. I jumped in the car and then I had to race past Srila Prabhupada. You shouldn't go in front of your guru, right? You should follow behind. But I had service, so I'm racing and see Prabhupada sitting beside in the other car. And I felt embarrassed, but put my head quickly, went past to tell all the devotees Prabhupada is coming. But everybody saw him before me, so I wasn't able to announce, right? But there was a fantastic festival, everyone will tell you that. 1974 Rath Yatra in Golden Gate Park, San Francisco. So, but the whole way, Prabhupada at one point, the Rath cart stopped. He told the devotees, I have to. And they said, what? Prabhupada, what you need to do? And the cart stopped. Prabhupada had to go pass urine. So he just went in the forest, and all the sannyasis and his servants were following him, and it was a trail of the devotees going. And so Prabhupada did his business, came back, cart again went, and then I was able to go on the stage with Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was sitting on stage chanting nicely, and on the stage were actually probably 30% of the devotees on the stage were coming from Vancouver, because there were good musicians, and one of the temple presidents from Vancouver, he was very well known for his kirtan. You see him on the pictures playing mridanga, bahudak, and other devotees too. So then Prabhupada was playing cartels, and it looked like he wanted to do something. So I leaned over and I took Srila Prabhupada's cartels from his hand, and I turned around, because the cartels, I didn't know whose cartels, so I was looking, whose cartels are these? And then Prabhupada stood up and started dancing. So I'm not on that picture. So many years, oh no, I'm not on that picture. Then Yadabar Prabhu, he had made the film, and later he told me what happened. What happened was that the film, because in those days it was on film, right? And he ran out. So the picture was taken by Vishaka. And then just as soon as he got the film, and Prabhupada was already going to leave. So you don't see, well, you see him dancing a little bit. And then years later, many years, 30 years later, one of my godbrothers said, oh, Prabhu, you're on that film. And I said, no, I wasn't, because it... And he said, no, I saw, because what Yadabara remade the film and spliced it together. So then they saw me, it looked like I was taking something from Prabhupada. This is not true. I was just holding my hands to get Lady Subhadra's plate back. But in any case, so I was with Prabhupada there, and we went, because at that time New Vrindavan devotees were selling milk sweets. Prabhupada was encouraging temples to buy the milk sweets from New Vrindavan devotees. So we were going to buy some, and the devotee who was selling them was in the same building as Srila Prabhupada. So we were told, don't go and see Prabhupada, because he's always busy, he's got, don't go see. So we're, okay, we won't go. And one devotee that was with me, Mahesh, when we were leaving, all of a sudden he disappeared. I said, where's Mahesh? Mahesh ran into the room with Prabhupada and dove underneath the coffee table to touch Prabhupada's feet. So because I have a bit of a Kshatriya nature, so I was, anyway, manages, I'm chastising Mahesh. But I always thought, why don't I do things like that, to get close to Prabhupada? Maybe it seemed like, it was like a little rascal, but that's eternally to his benefit, right? You have to be very, very eager. Then later on, actually, because maybe I was fanning Prabhupada, and Dinabandhu Prabhu also, years later, many years later, 28, 30 years later, he posted a picture. And this is the only picture of me with Srila Prabhupada. I'm standing with Dinabandhu and other devotees around Prabhupada. So I'm finding things out later, you know, which is very nice as memory of when we were there. So I saw Prabhupada then, and again, I came to Bombay here, 1976. My purpose in coming to India was to build Srila Prabhupada a house in Mayapur. The devotees in Seattle, Washington had a jewelry business and were raising money, had made a lot of money in the jewelry business and wanted to build Prabhupada a house. So I told them I want to come and build the house. I had some ability that way. And I phoned Srila Prabhupada, who was running here. So he said, yes, come right away to Bombay. So I was here in Bombay for several months. And from here I went to Mayapur. In Mayapur, I didn't see Prabhupada. He didn't come there. And it was too difficult for me to stay in Mayapur. One building, I got sick. And my first child was getting sick in Canada. She was only a year old, so I went back. But then I came back 6 months later and was with Prabhupada in '77 in Mayapur. And there's several memories of Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur. You know, I actually never sat with Prabhupada or talked with Srila Prabhupada directly like that. Well, my mood, our mood, and we were told to do our service. Just do your service. And at that time when I joined in '72. But already the society was growing and the main managers were blocking ways to Prabhupada. So unless you did some really exceptional service or you were intimately connected with the managers who had this kind of access, then no. I miss Prabhupada here in Bombay, I miss Prabhupada in Mayapur, and he did come to Canada, but he went to Toronto in Canada while I was in Mayapur. When I went back to Canada, he went to Mayapur. When I was in San Diego, and I left San Diego, 2 weeks later, Prabhupada went to San Diego. So I missed him a number of times. And looking back, sometimes I think, why did that happen? I was speaking with a devotee, a very famous devotee here in our society, Bhaktivedanta from Vrindavan, a very great artist. He told me he was where was it? At Central Park, New York, when Prabhupada was living there. And he was, Bhaktisiddhanta was living very close there. And he walked past Srila Prabhupada. And but he only became a devotee much later, 7 years later or something. And I was thinking about what he said, and I had an attraction to go east already in 1967. So I was in Montreal when Srila Prabhupada, and then I went back in 1968. So Srila Prabhupada was already attracting us in different ways to go to these places. But personally, no, very in the way of interaction like that at that level. But I have to say that when you do some service for Srila Prabhupada and read his books, that he becomes very personal with you through that level, and that the physical association, however nice it is not really the most important thing. And the majority of the devotees were like me, in the sense that they did their service. The managers, they did what they needed to do, but there were whole backup teams to make it all happen. So many of the devotees didn't have that kind of personal, direct opportunity to speak to Srila Prabhupada. But even when I got Brahminical initiation, the first initiation was he wrote a letter, and I accept you as my disciple. That was 6 months after I joined in January 73. And then when I got Brahminical initiation, I had just seen Prabhupada in Los Angeles, and I was doing my service in Vancouver, and other devotees had not seen Prabhupada. So I said, okay, I'll stay back so you can go. But now, again, years later, and why did I not go? Then Prabhupada would have put Brahman thread on my shoulder and whispered in my ear. So what? My brain is not working quite right, in one sense, right? So basically, my service has always been at a distance. Yes. I mean, I was very fortunate to meet Srila Prabhupada in that way, and the conviction in his writing, his lectures and everything. And the memories of him, I'm learning more about Srila Prabhupada by the books that the devotees are writing, which is so important for all of us. For some of the devotees, all of us, we are getting more intimately connected with Prabhupada in that way. So when Shyamasundar wrote his book, Chasing Rhinos, 3 days, I read his book. So wonderful. You get these behind-the-scenes stories we never heard. We didn't hear them in those days. It's only coming out now that they're sharing these memories. Yeah, so my situation is very sad on one level. On the other level, Prabhupada came later on in dreams and was very personal at that time. And the service I did then was so very simple. But he came in dream several times, and he made me some nice promise. I didn't think I deserved it at all, but yeah. Well, I know that Prabhupada, when I went, was in, this was recently again brought up, actually, when we were in Mayapur, and Prabhupada was sick already, Gaur Purnima Mayapur 77. But he came down to see the devotees perform the Ramayan. Saddam Prabhu, he was a very good actor. Prabhupada loved him a lot. And Prabhupada was sitting in the back of the audience. He was watching from the back. And the play was going on, and everybody, all the devotees, sitting under the pandal, they were watching Prabhupada. They weren't watching the play. So when Prabhupada laughed, we all laughed. So we were enjoying Prabhupada's enjoyment. We weren't watching the play very much. And every devotee that was there at the time will tell the same story. When I saw Prabhupada first time in New York and he was giving the news conference, and we were jumping up and down, and I was jumping up and down. Again, also the devotees, many tell the same story. Then all of a sudden, you see Prabhupada's eyes and he looks at you. All of a sudden, I felt like a mouse. I suddenly had a feeling as though Prabhupada said, "Oh, you again. What are you doing here again? Another lifetime? I have to come back to save you?" So penetrating is association, just a simple contact like that. So yeah, there are memories, but a lot of the memories are very brief, but very penetrating. very penetrating, stays with you for life, and hopefully all my life, future, forever, right? Well, I'm not sure, but Srila Prabhupada, his letters, for some time when he would write letter to a devotee, when the letter came, the mail was always in the hands of the temple president. And usually the letters were read to all the devotees, even a lot of the personal letters. But then what ended up happening was that letters would come and there would be specific instruction given to that devotee's writing. And we would all take Prabhupada's instructions for everybody. So if that sometimes caused trouble. It caused trouble because that specific instruction was meant for the recipient, not for everybody. So it's very important in that sense. We saw difficulties at times. And in that sense, I found it was very important to actually be careful. If a specific instruction is given to one individual, it doesn't necessarily apply to somebody else. There's a personal aspect of the relationship that we have with our spiritual master. As Srila Prabhupada is writing in his books, sometimes when you're reading his books, you feel something penetrating you personally. And we have to accept that as Prabhupada talking to us. But we shouldn't generalize. And there was a tendency to generalize, and that may still be there, even after all these years. One specific thing was that many of Prabhupada's letters were published in the books. So there's these volumes of Prabhupada's letters. I always wondered, it would be really nice if somehow we could find out and publish the letters that were written to Prabhupada and the questions that were asked, so we could balance it with a better understanding, because the answer or the responses of Prabhupada didn't necessarily apply to everybody. I know when a story you probably heard, but when Srila Swami was preaching in Japan, just after leaving Japan, he came to Vancouver. So I had his association. Srila was the actor. And he came through Vancouver. And again, years later, I heard how Srila Swami was told by Srila Prabhupada that Lord Chaitanya would come and Prabhupada would personally come and save him when he left his body. And Prabhupada had said, any devotee that goes to foreign lands like this preaching, that it means a great deal to Srila Prabhupada. So I was thinking, that's what I want to do. So I went to South Africa and opened a preaching center, and Mauritius to help with preaching there. And these days I'm trying to help in Cambodia. So I thought, I need to do something that captures Srila Prabhupada's attention. Even while Prabhupada was present with us, I wanted to be temple president. I thought I have the ability and I've experience, but it's the temple presidents who get to be personally with Prabhupada. So I wanted to be temple president. So in 1977 at the Gaur Purnima festival, Rupanuga Prabhu asked me to be temple president of Seattle, not Seattle, but St. Louis, Missouri. Yes, St. Louis, Missouri in the US. So I was president briefly, but then Prabhupada was sick, so I couldn't go and be with Prabhupada. And at the time, the devotees were being asked to focus on book distribution. Prabhupada's health will be restored if you go out and book distribution and things like that. I know when Srila Prabhupada actually, I went back to Vancouver, I was asked to sell a property that the devotees didn't find suitable. So this was in the mountains and very isolated. So I went there to sell the property in October of 1977. It was cold winter, and I was just myself and my wife. Were staying some distance from the farm because the farm was not suitable anymore. So I only found out that Prabhupada left his body 3 days afterwards, because it was only landlines in those days. Nobody had cell phones or anything. And when we heard the news and I had to look after this farm, it's up a mountain like this. It was so devastating. I thought, I'll just drive off the mountain and finish my life. What is the use of our life without Prabhupada? But like Krishna told, Lord Chaitanya, he told Sanatana Goswami that don't go commit suicide, your body belongs to me. So our bodies become the property of our spiritual master. We should always think in terms of service to him. And despite the fact that things may be very depressed at times because of situations like that, we should just carry on somehow or other. Even as devotees within the society may be challenges, but everything is passing, you know? Everything that has a beginning has an end, except devotional service, right? So we just keep doing devotional service and pray for the day that we'll personally be again in the association. We're still in the association of Prabhupada. He's here very much. And that was our mood then. And as long as we maintain that mood even now, everything can be very vibrant and wonderful. And I think devotees that serve very intently like that, they feel that. They have that experience. Yeah. Prabhupada is my life. He's means everything to me, in the sense that he's my future. He's my real past, and he's my future also. He's my focus. He's my father to guide me wherever he wants. Doesn't matter. Prabhupada wants me to go here or there, I'll go. If Prabhupada were to say to me right now, I want you to go here or there, I would go. Yeah, without any question. I want him to say. I want him to come and say, okay, you know, wake up, do this, do that. No, he's everything. He's our Savior. He's our future. He's our everything. You know, we see through the eyes of Prabhupada. You know, when a child is small and he's holding the hand of his father, and the father says, oh, he's my friend, then we like that person. Or if he says he's my enemy, he doesn't like me, he caused disturbance, then we see everything through the eyes of our spiritual master. Right? How else? That's the only vision we have. See everything through the eyes of Srila Prabhupada. You want to know Prabhupada? He does give us everything in the books, and the more that we see everything through the eyes of our spiritual master, the more ready we'll be to rejoin him wherever he is. If you want to go to the spiritual world, that's fine. But for me, Prabhupada is my spiritual world. Yeah. Anything spiritual, I have no interest in, even when sometimes I hear the description of Vaikuntha or everything with beautiful gems. that's not important to me at all. It doesn't matter. If it's a grass hut and we get the association of Srila Prabhupada, that's very beautiful and wonderful. Forget all the opulence. The opulence is there for those people who need it. I only need his association and his service, that's all. Definitely. Srila Prabhupada, his personalism, his compassion and personalism going hand in hand. Seeing him interact with other individuals, he's so kind and loving and compassionate that even when speaking, the many videos that were there of Prabhupada speaking to others, he's always feeling compassionate towards us to free us from our difficulties, because he understands that there is life without misery. There's life without repeated birth and death. There's full satisfaction in the spiritual world, and he wants to share that with everybody. It's like in his talks, in his whether it's a lecture or whether it's personally talking to people, he's say, why do you continue suffering? Why are you doing this to yourself? You know, why are you harming yourself in so many different ways? These things all interfere. But the quality of compassion, most definitely. Yeah. Well, I served with Giriraj Swami in Mauritius, and while we were there, Giriraj Swami, of course, many things have been, he himself is related, and many things have been mentioned about Giriraj Swami. What I noticed, and he had so much association with Srila Prabhupada, so I had the privilege of working with Giriraj Swami in Mauritius. And I noticed Giriraj Swami was always thinking how Prabhupada would respond to any given situation. So sometimes Giriraj Swami would stop doing something. One time I went with him to an office building, and he was going up the stairs, and in the middle of walking up the stairs, he just stopped and said, no, something is not right. And he just turned around and went down again. He was meant to actually meet some businessman or something. And he just stopped in the middle. And I could see how he and other devotees are focused on trying to please Srila Prabhupada. Even if I don't understand necessarily, or maybe even agree, my mind might think, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Or they may have a different opinion of things than I have. But over time, over the years, you start to realize that actually everything they're doing, they're trying to please Prabhupada. Even I may not agree, it doesn't, I'm not the judge. I should give up this idea of being the judge. If Prabhupada is pleased, then that's perfect. And since they are trying to please Prabhupada, then that's perfect. And the sooner that I can actually come to that full understanding, then I can appreciate everything everyone's doing and no longer sit in judgment thinking I know better. So being with Giriraj Swami, that taught me a lot. But also over the years, seeing how some of my ideas where I thought I knew better, that Krishna actually takes you into a new phase of understanding because he directly interacts with you. As long as you're thinking of pleasing Krishna, he's dealing with you personally, you know. So sometimes difficulties come, personal challenges come, but even those personal challenges are things meant for us to, again, increase our maturity. And one time, Prabhupada was asked by one of his senior devotees who was having trouble with a junior devotee. So the senior devotee asked Prabhupada, Prabhupada, why do you tolerate that devotee? And Prabhupada said, the same way that I tolerate you. So we come to that, just hearing little things like that makes us realize also how much we should actually be very tolerant. Lord Chaitanya says, Trinadapi Sinichena. Prabhupada is a perfect example of it. He tolerated so many things from us, honestly. I mean, and he still does. In a day-to-day basis, you know, he's allowing us to do so many carry on in so many ways, which is not really paka, you know. But because the intention to please him is there, he's treating us like children, almost, you know. What can we give Krishna? What can we give the spiritual master? He has everything. He's full of satisfaction. He only wants our benefit. He's doing for our benefit. So what can we give? Right? We try to do what we can, but if he's complete, so all we can do is ask him, what would you like us to do to help you? But when you're around senior devotees, older devotees, after a little while you get to understand, oh, I might have a different type of personality, I might have a different point of view, but that doesn't mean that I have the right to negate or think that what he's doing, that there's something wrong with it. No, because as long as they're trying to please Srila Prabhupada, then that's what's important. They're trying to please Krishna, that's what's important. Well, who cares what the rest of society? That's not important. Who cares? Does Krishna care about our loving devotion to him, or about your criticism or my criticism of somebody who I don't really fully understand their relationship with Krishna or with spiritual master? So, you know, these kind of things we learn in association with other devotees. We get to know them, that we want to aspire to this. So many of these things we learn from Prabhupada, and we learn from the devotees who had association with him. And after all, in the end, what's Prabhupada going to say? Is he going to say to us, oh, you sat with me for 2 days? Or is he going to say, did you follow my instructions? What's going to be most important? So that is really, of course, it's all wonderful. So I'm not saying, you know, but from my point of view, I have to use that rationale anyway, because I didn't get that personal association. So I have to go in the path set out for me by Prabhupada and Krishna, because they're working side by side for my spiritual benefit, right? Yeah. Well, there's so many things that could be said, generally speaking, but I think to learn to appreciate, as in the Ramayana, you know, Garuda or Hanuman, these devotees, they did such big things, and that's wonderful. And the Lord, you know, we hear about them all the time, but we also hear about the sparrow, the little bird, but just a little bit of sand. In other words, we should do what we can. We should do what we can and not try to exceed, you know, or like Maya can be very tricky. Maya can make us depressed because we're not actually achieving something we might have hoped to achieve. But, you know, depression is just also her trick, because we become depressed in devotional service. We may think, oh, I'm not good, I'll leave, I'm not helping at all, I'm going to leave, you know, give up. Or I'm not being appreciated, I'll just leave. No. We should understand that Srila Prabhupada appreciated everything that anybody tried to do in helping establish this movement. And he'll go on appreciating because he's always there, right? He reasons ill who think that Vaishnavas die while living still in sound. A written wonderful poem while Bhaktivedanta was meditating at the samadhi. So we should understand that the little bit of service, it all adds up. It all adds up over time. There's one verse, actually a purport, Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, verse 40. After Arjuna asked Krishna, what about the person who doesn't follow up and perfectly execute his devotional life? What happens to him? Isn't he worse off than anybody? And of course we know Krishna's response is no, he'll be born like this and that. There's a couple of sentences in that purport that Prabhupada says, even if you have to take birth in a lower form of life because of offenses, your Krishna consciousness will never be lost. And that struck me as very significant, because there are times in our spiritual lives when we will become disturbed by Maya. And if we, in other words, you know, we should read Prabhupada's books, because we'll find little sentences and paragraphs like this that'll really impact us at the right time. I mean, there were times in my spiritual life when I had difficulty. I just opened Bhagavad Gita at some page, and even in that page, something Prabhupada or Krishna says is just the perfect time. So we shouldn't ever be tricked by Maya into depression. Oh, I'm useless, I'm no good. No. Everybody has ability. So in from my experience personally, and my recommendation from Prabhupada's books, is that you just keep going on with your service and trying to please your spiritual master, and that will be pleasing Srila Prabhupada. Yes. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Hare Prabhupada. I appreciate the opportunity. Hare Krishna.